Feeling drained. Feeling pretty drained right now. Just coming off of some intense, intense family business meetings. Uh, not what, not how I wanted them to go. Ended up in a little collision with the wife. My wife doesn't collide very um, gently. She's very matter of fact, very to the point, very loud. I love her. She tells me the truth. She tells me her truth. I tell her my truth. And then we fight for fight for each other. And in the end, we end up coming to an agreement and coming together. That's what happened. But the process can be tough sometimes. But we're willing to go there and we battle. And if you don't have those conversations, then you don't really achieve anything. You don't really move forward for the betterment of your family, your relationship, and so on. So let me give you a little backstory. This day started in a good place, which unfortunately I screwed up. It started in a good place. Amanda and Bristol were gone for the weekend and came back, so they're kind of relaxing, having a chill day today. And so they're at the house, inside the house, which is rare because they're usually outside on the farm, riding horses, all that kind of stuff. And last week, if you saw my video last Sunday, saw that I was setting up some goals for my kids for this summer, three kids. And once a week, they were going to have a check in meeting with me to go over the five things, five areas that we wanted them to work on this summer and focus on and get better at. So Bristol wasn't here this weekend. So today I said, hey, are we going to have our meeting? And this little back and forth. Of course, she didn't want to do it. And we ended up doing it. The caveat was that if we recorded it as a podcast, she would do it. And so we brought out the podcast recorder and did that. And I thought it went fine, but Amanda didn't really like how it was going down. So we had this conflict about it. So um, anyway, we got into this back and forth about structure and me being so serious, me trying to basically lead these kids like a business, in the way that I operate from a business level doesn't work at the family level. So we get into this back and forth discussion about that. And I'm very frustrated. I'm confused. I'm like, look, I'm trying to help these kids set goals and understand how to grow and mature and so on and so forth. Of course, everything I think that I'm saying is right. It makes sense. And then she's on the flip side of the whole like feeling based, like they're kids, can't be so serious, you got to make it fun, so on and so forth. So we battled with that. And finally, once like we settled down, we realized, hey, look, we're actually on the same page here. We actually, what was the objective? What am I trying to do? And like, what is best for the kids? And we realized that we're in agreement with what we want to do for them, with what we're trying to do for them. What we weren't in agreement with was the method of getting there. So I basically had started last week with the method in my way and didn't really fully bring her into the method and how we're going to accomplish it. So once we talked through that, we came to an agreement. Okay, this is kind of how we're going to operate. This is kind of how we're going to hold these kids accountable to these five things. Some of the specifics, like whether it was a specific responsibility that they're going to have this summer out at our barn. They have specific goals that they want to achieve. So it's like, okay, how are we going to keep track of these goals, so on and so forth. They have horse riding goals, for example. And I want to help lead them not to necessarily accomplish the goal. That would be great. But my goal is to teach them how to set goals, right? So, but the lesson here with this whole situation was we weren't really on the same page about the overall objective. before we came up with the method to accomplishing that objective. And so it didn't kind of rally the troops together. Now, how to get this whole fun environment thing, I really don't know. And my kids are 9, 9, and 7, so they they are very much they can keep their attention span for more than a couple seconds, but when they're bored, they don't. So they're obviously not going to want to be in a meeting. Um, but they do want to set goals. They do want to accomplish things, and they are interested um, in doing the things that we're talking about doing this summer. They get enjoyment out of accomplishment. They get this sense of pride and success, and I think that's good for them. And ultimately, that's what I want to see them uh, feel. I want them to see for themselves is that they can actually try to do something that is more than just what they're doing right this moment. Like, and set a goal that is in the future and work a little bit towards that every day. And that's what I'm trying to get them to achieve. But to me, there is a business side of family that needs to be talked about, specifically when it comes to money. So follow up that conversation with Amanda and I about the kids, and we started talking about our family finances. So we got into that discussion, and with us, it's been an interesting it's been an interesting ride for us. We've been married for 2 years, and we had financial discussion before we got married. It's kind of like, this is what our family finances look like. This is what our income looks like. This is what our expenses look like, so on and so forth. And we had set some goals at that time. And we accomplished some of those goals. We were able to move into the farm, for example. We were able to buy some horses and things like that. And what was good, which were all good things from a success standpoint, also led to some chaos and some taking our eye off of the fundamental things, which is keeping track of the day to day finances and talking about them on a consistent basis. So our financial situation changed. It changed for the better. And then it was like, oh, got a little lazy. Admit it. You know, you start to make more money. You start to get a little bit less concerned about your day to day spending. Well, we move into this house. We have a lot of things going on here that we are spending money on. And you get this mindset that everything is necessary or it's a need. And you got to be careful with that, because if you're not looking at your actual spending, how do you know when you're actually going over budget? Because if you operate off of what it feels like, feeling doesn't really help when it comes to finances, when it comes to numbers, spreadsheets, and things like that. They are what they are, they're facts. You made this much money, you spent this much money. So all that discussion led to me saying, "Hey, look, I'm going to start looking at some of this stuff a little bit differently." And we were using a system before, and I was using QuickBooks, which wouldn't be a typical system for most people, but as part of my business, that's what I did. So I was like, "Oh, I'm just going to integrate this into QuickBooks," and I've been doing that for several years, and I had a system for it, and it was working very well. And I was using that on a week by week basis. Well, things had changed dramatically when we got married and we introduced other businesses into the fold, and it got really, really complicated. And what I found is that it got complicated to a point where it stopped getting done consistently. And it was like, okay, well, we don't really need it that bad. It's not a pain point right now because we're doing okay. So we kind of took our hand off of it, took the finger off the pulse. And so I'm going through some changes in my business. So it was like, okay, now I gotta take a look at our spending again, just to make sure we're doing okay and see how much time we have, what our cash flow is like, and things like that. And I started looking at some stuff, and I saw some surprises. Be honest, saw some surprises that I was like, oh crap, how did that happen? And what I realized was that I immediately jumped into scarcity mindset. Scarcity mindset, like, oh, we're spending too much. We need to stop this, stop that, stop that, stop that. That would have been my initial or my old response to myself. It's like, just cut everything. Stop doing this. We don't need this. And then, like, this level of like anger boils up inside of me. And it's like, why did we do this? Why did we do that? And then I realized that that's not the initial response. Yes, there might be some things that we're spending that we could cut back on. There's no doubt about that. Everybody can say that at any time. But approaching it from the relationship standpoint and having the conversation with my wife, that is not the place to start. Because if you start, it can feel attacking if it's something that she spent, and vice versa if it's something that I spent. She'd go, well, do we really need this? And she could go, well, do you really need that? And so when I match this up to a business environment, I used to take the same approach. I used to have this scarcity mindset towards spending where, well, do we really need one, two, three? Because are we managing it? Are we managing our costs, or are we trying to generate income? So, for example, in business marketing, we always the accountants always battle with the marketing guy. It's like, why do we need to spend this? Why do we need to spend that? Where's the proof that all this spending is generating more income? I'm not seeing the income grow and all this kind of stuff. And so it was always a battle. And scarcity mindset is always going to say cut, 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 cut. But I look at it differently now. Not that all spending is good, because you got to be careful with your spending. It's got to be intentional when it's an investment, things like that. But when you've created a certain level or a lifestyle for yourself, and then your finances get come into question again, that's a dangerous situation, because you've set a new standard, and that's what's happened with us. Like, we set a new standard, so I don't want to go back on that standard. I don't want to say, hey, we can't do this anymore, when a year ago it was like, this is what we're trying to do. I can't just say, hey, this whole horse thing, we're gonna have to cut this. Well, we worked really hard for this. This was one of our goals. So when we look at our monthly spending, we also have to know, what is the bigger picture to our finances. It's not just a month to month thing all the time. Just as much as you want to have some savings and be putting away for that emergency fund, or that just in case things pop up fund, you need to be looking at that. And for me, I was fortunately was able to go look at that and say, okay, well, it's not ideal what we spent the last couple months, but we do have some savings. But let's talk about, what do we want to be? Where do we want to be in 3 months from now? So what I mean by that is, I just didn't want to have that knee jerk reaction to a couple months where we overspent and say, hey, we need to cut this, cut this, cut this. Because that's not a good way to live. Because next month, because you do the same thing, you have a good month and you're like, add back, add back, add back. And if you're constantly making all these decisions up and down, up and down, up and down, it's really erratic. And when it's inconsistent like that, it's not healthy. You make poor decisions. So what we agreed to do was say, okay, we're not going to make any changes right away. What we're going to do is we're going to set a budget. So we created a new system. We use Mint. We're using Mint. We're testing this, and it's been around forever. I used it many years ago, but it's better now than it used to be. And I tried out a couple other apps. This one was the best that I've seen so far. It was able to connect all the accounts that I had, so I recommend it so far. But we're going to use it now or throughout the month. So I got the app on both of our phones, got on my computer, and we're just going to see. We set a budget for, like, I don't know, 10 different categories. I was able to look at my historical stuff and set budgets for the month and say, okay, well, this is where we're at. And we cut a few just based on what we had been spending, but we weren't like cutting like things that we were like subscribed to, or selling a car or anything like that. It was just like, oh, that's how much we spent on going out to eat. Let's trim that back from a budget perspective, and now let's watch it every week this month. So it's a mindset around it. It's now the money decision is on our mind whenever we say, hey, when we start talking about what are we doing for dinner tonight, we're more cognizant of it. And it's just that little tweak when you come to managing your finances, you have to be tracking it on a consistent basis. I'm just like everybody else where it's like, hey, I'm prone to uh, just not staying like getting comfortable with this and just getting lazy with it. And that's what happened. And for me, I had to take it a step further and be like, I need a new system because the old system was too complicated. So we're simplifying it. And I'm going to get Amanda involved too because she's got a business and she's got the horse stuff she's doing. And I don't know what those things are. If she's going to a certain purchasing from somebody or writing a check, she writes checks to some people. It's like, I don't know what that is. I need you to write down what that is so she can now track it in the app instead of me having to ask her every month. It's getting frustrated back and forth, back and forth. So, um, all that to be said is like, I don't know how I'm going to run my family as a business and not make it feel like a business. Because I do feel like we need to have meetings on a regular basis. But what I'm trying to do, number one, simplify it, make it easier for everybody that's involved, and then get everybody on the same page. So, fortunately, even though these conversations, I call them meetings, they weren't really that serious, but these conversations started out serious and didn't go well from the beginning. They ended in a good place because we got on the same page about what the objective was, and then we ended up agreeing on a method that we could both work with together. So really hard in your marriage to bring the money conversations in on a consistent basis. But even inside of a business, it can be tough to do this sometimes because you might have leaders on your team that aren't really money people. Even the owners of businesses that I work with don't want to talk about the money a lot of the times because it confuses them, it stresses them out. Marketing people never want to talk about money. They just assume that they're gonna make profit off of everything they spend, like times 10, which is never the case. And the accounting people don't want to spend any money. They're just like, we don't need any of these people, no, these systems. No. So it's really hard. The more people that are involved with the money, the harder it is. So you have to have that objective and you have to have an agreed upon method. So within a business, you definitely need to be having monthly meetings. But you also need to not be doing like this like month to month, just like nitpicking the spending. I don't like that. You need to have awareness and then you need to have commitment and accountability. So if there is something that's being spent by somebody, that person needs to know what it is and what the relevance of it is. And if there's an investment, it needs to be like, what's the payback? So what the other thing that Amanda and I agreed on was, okay, let's watch it this month. Don't have to make any significant changes, but next month we have to see where our income comes in. Our income fluctuates just based on how we run our businesses. So if the income doesn't come into a certain level, then we'll probably have to make some decisions. And then we'll just keep that going forward month to month. So I'll keep people updated on this. I know it will go well if we consistently have the meetings. So that's, to me, that was what I was being really persistent about and up to the point of like not being very fun. Because I was just like, we got to have the meeting. We got to have the meeting. We got to reserve space to talk about these things. Same with my kids. It's like, kids, like, this is what you want. If you want to have those responsibilities, if you want to earn money, if you want to prove that you can do this, that, and the other thing, you got to do the basics. So you got to set goals, blah, 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 blah. All these things, these 5 things we came up with for them. And I can't be walking around them every single day and being like, make sure you do it. Like they have to learn accountability and ownership for their own stuff. So that's why we check in once a week with the kids. So